I'd like to call this November 21st, 2023 Board of Education regular meeting to order. George, can you take the roll?
Here.
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 Here. It's okay. It's okay. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are going to start our meeting out a little differently tonight and enter an executive session to discuss.
To consider the employment, dismissal, and discipline of a public employee, and to consider matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations of state statutes.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Kilbane, second by Mrs. Bissell. Any discussion? Hearing none, George, can you take the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. We will enter an executive session at 6:08. We do have public business to continue with, so we'll be back at 7 p.m. Right, we will resume our meeting, public meeting at 7:05. I'm going to start with item C, district goals. Our district's three-year strategic plan is made up of 4 strategic priorities. Tonight's meeting includes several items with respect to our district's finances. These tie directly to our strategic priority of leveraging funding and facilities. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Ryba for student achievement.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Cobain and Ms. Stovcek for our Student Achievement Awards for this meeting.
We can let Bill come up and introduce Tasha. Is she here?
Yes.
Come on up.
All right, this is Teja Ramakrishnan. She is a sophomore at Strongsville High School, and what she's being honored for tonight is she was named a Polaris Satellite Student of the Quarter. And I like to always explain what that means because there's multiple Polaris awards. A Satellite Student of the Quarter is a student who attends a Polaris class at our campus. The class is taught by Mr. Steller, who teaches engineering as well. Tasia here got the award for outstanding achievement in her digital electronics class, which is an honors class. But I want to add, so you know a little more about her, she has a 4.6 GPA. She is currently in multiple AP courses as a sophomore. She's an honors Algebra 2 Trig, the digital honors course. She is also a viola player in our amazing string orchestra. And every time these awards come up and a kid like Tasia's name pops up, I have to go look because she doesn't get in trouble, so I don't know who she is right off the bat. And I said, let me check out this kid. And her, when I say she has a 4.6, like I looked at her grades, I've never seen a student, the first quarter, she had 100, like at average, she had 103 in French, 102 in honors algebra 2 trig. So she's not just straight A's, she has like straight A's plus. So definitely a high achieving young lady. So these 2 board members here are gonna come over and present this with you, but I just wanted to say how proud we are of you. Thank you. Yeah.
About the class or what you've learned in the class? Well, I think Polaris itself gives me a great opportunity in order to be able to take this course in the first place. And, you know, I just think it's such an engaging and it's a great class overall. It's so hands-on and it's a great experience.
Well, congratulations. This is the Extra Mile Award for Engineering, Polaris Career Center. And if your dad wants to come up and get a picture of you, very much deserved. Congratulations. That is beautiful. Thank you. Bill, you're going to get in on the picture?
I always just was going to do dad first. I'm with you. All right, Dad, you get in the picture. Oh, I'll get one of this. Oh, we leave one. Now, one more. I gotta send, the one I'm sending out, social media's got a dad in it.
Congratulations. You deserve it. Congratulate you.
Run, Sharon.
Congratulations again. I'm not as quick as her.
Congratulations.
Right. Next on our agenda is public comment. I don't have any slips. George, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay.
Dawn, did you get any? I don't.
Dawn, do you have any public comment come in while we were in executive? Okay, all right. Moving along. This is a great time. If you have homework to do and you wanted to go home, you're excused. Even though I think we're starting break.
Yeah,
You too.
it's break.
Your
Take a
homework
break from
is ready
doing
to go.
homework and relax for a second.
Enjoy your family.
Next, we have approval of minutes. Motion to approve the minutes of October 26, 2023. All district video and audio recordings will be a permanent part of the minutes. And with that, I will turn it over to George for the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Hausum. I have a series of items for your consideration tonight. The first being the financial report for the month ended October 31st, 2023. Those reports are attached, both the financial report and the supplemental report. I'm not going to present those reports, as in the second item I have for your consideration is the district's November 5-year forecast, which will go into the forecast in more detail. So I'm going to put that on the screen. Again, as a reminder, the forecast is one of those items that we have to do twice a year. The required filing dates with the Ohio Department of Education is November, and then once again in May. Our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. So what we typically do is in June, we approve a temporary budget for July. Our budget has to be adopted by September 30th. During September, we do an annual budget based on all the hiring that's taken place and the changes in positions and additional contracts and needs for the upcoming school year. And then at that time, I also presented a budget forecast to the community at that time. And then in November, we update that forecast based on how things are trending so far through the year. Kind of one of the purpose and objectives of the 5-year forecast is what the Ohio Department of Education does is their purpose and objectives for the 5-year forecast is threefold. One is to engage the local Board of Education and the community in the long-range planning and discussion of the financial issues facing the school district. 2 is to serve as a basis of determining the school district's ability to sign certificate required by Ohio Revised Code 5705.412, commonly known as the 412 certificate. What that means is anytime there's a item that's approved by the board, I have to certify that the funds are available. So this is what the forecast does, is certifies that the funds are available, and especially with contracts being multi-year periods, such as our collective bargaining contracts, we have to certify that those funds are available for those needs for the duration that we said that we're going to be in. And 3 is to provide a method of the Department of Education and the auditor of state to identify school districts with potential financial problems. And then the forecast methodology. The forecast is prepared based upon historical trends and current factors. The information is then extrapolated into estimates for subsequent years. The forecast variables can change multiple times throughout the fiscal year, and while cash flow monitoring helps identify unexpected variances, no process is guaranteed. The intent is to provide the district's financial trend over time and a roadmap for decisions aimed at encouraging financial stability or sustainability and stability. So basically the forecast is prepared based on the assumptions that we have at the time, what we know and the variables that are in place. And as we see throughout the year, the variables can change at a moment's notice or from year over year. This presentation contains 4 components. The major assumptions that go into the forecast, then the general fund revenues, expenditures, and the 5-year forecast summary at the end. First, revenue assumptions. Property taxes are our biggest revenue source, and one of the factors that impacts tax collections is the collection rate. So that is a factor that goes into the assumptions. As that percentage changes, so does it can impact tax collections one way or another. Based on our 3-year trend, the 3-year average is 98.46. But the last 2 years, we've been collecting at 99.26. So if it continues based on the last 3 years, tax revenue could be slightly higher than what's forecasted. Another assumption is the valuation of the city. The valuation is what drives the tax rate, and any increases that go into it or decreases on how that tax rate changes. In collection year 22, it was a triannual budget update for Cuyahoga County. Residential values increased by 15.74%, and commercial values netted 1.59%. And then during collection year 23, residential values increased by 0.48%, while commercial increased by 1. Those changes are mainly done at the Board of Revision. And then in collection year 25, which will be at the end of next calendar year, for tax year 2024, 6-year update for Cuyahoga County is due for the county. So they'll be sending out new home valuations. Right now, the forecast assumes an 8.8% increase based on an increased average home values within the city from the last 3-year update. So I looked from 2022 to now to see what the average home price is valued on Zillow, and since that change, it's been 8.8%. So that's a baseline to what maybe we could expect for Cuyahoga County, but we won't know until next year when they're done with their process. But at this time, this is what I'm basing the assumption on. And what does that mean? A lot of times we get this when when the triennial updates happen, is, oh, my values are going up, so are my taxes. Well, with House Bill 920, what that means is, as values go up, there's an effective rate, so it drives the effective rate down, which illustrates in this graphic, as the home values go up, the tax rate will decrease. And it could reverse the inverse. If home values go down, the tax rate can increase in order to collect that same level of funding when that levy was approved. However, if the values decrease, the effective rate can only increase up to the voted millage, and then any decrease after that is lost revenue. For us, I'm not anticipating that at this point. Our value should increase, which would drive the effective tax rate down. Just looking at historical district values versus tax rates, as you can see by the graphic on the left-hand side, in 2015 there was a value increase of 3.42%, and that had a corresponding tax rate decrease of 2.23%. In tax year 2018, there was a valuation increase of close to 11%, and in tax year 18, there was a tax rate decrease of close to 8%. In tax year 2019, you'll see a tax rate increase, which was the 2019 levy that came on the books, which increased the tax rate in that year. And then in 2020, there was insignificant increase, which resulted in no tax rate decrease. And then 2021, which was the last triennial update, values increased by 15.75%, and there was a corresponding 11% decrease in tax rate. And then with the projected data for tax year 24, with a projected increase of 8.88%, there's a corresponding decrease in tax rate of 6.7%. And then just kind of to show how it looks in the big picture, the very top line is the full voted millage rate. Currently, for tax year 23, for just the general operating fund, the voted tax rate is 83.68 mils. The effective rate is the gray graphic. As you'll see that as the voted millage went up in the blue line, the gray line has been going down. So we're at 35.62 mils for residential. And then what the red line is, it's called a 20 mil floor. Once you get to that 20 mil floor, then House Bill 920 is no longer in play. If values increase to the point where it drives effective rate down to 20 mils, then whatever the increase is, the increase is. There has been recent proposed legislation currently in either the House or in the Senate at the state level about possibly lowering the floor to a lesser number, because some cities now have been seeing significant property values increases the past couple of years, which has been driving more and more districts down to the 20 mil floor. So any questions on that? These are kind of new graphics that I've always kind of talked about it, but this is the first time that's in a graphic format.
I
Oh, thanks. Revenue assumptions continued. The first two is just more of a historical because that line in the forecast is still there, but as you recall, in collection year 22, we had the mall reappraisal. And then in fiscal year 22, there was based on that mall reappraisal, there was a $2.5 million tax refund issued that came out of our tax collections from the county that was refunded back to the mall for that property. So when comparing fiscal year 22, which is in the forecast, is one of the historical years, you'll see a dip, and then the following year, you'll see an increase, and that's the reason for the decline in 22, and then the increase in 23 was the refund for the mall. And then we have two renewal levies. In May 2019, residents approved a 5-year, $5.9 mil levy with collections beginning January of 2020. The forecast assumes the levy will expire tax year of December 31, 2023, and collections will continue through December 31 of 2024, if not renewed. And then we also have another renewal in November of 21. Residents renewed a 5-year, $6 mil levy with collections beginning January 23. The forecast assumes the levy will expire in tax year 2026, and collections will continue through December of 2027. State funding, we are on the new state funding formula, and this year the biennium budget. They have continued the state funding formula. We'll see an increase in state funding for fiscal year 24 of $574,000, and in fiscal year 25 about $400,000. So for a cumulative increase of $980,000 over the 2-year under this biennium budget. As part of that, there are restricted aid that comes with the state funding formula. The restricted categories are the success and wellness funds that we presented on last board meeting of $244,000, the career tech and ELL funds of $33,718, disadvantaged pupil aid, which is what the DPIA stands for, of $37,223, and the gifted aid of $181,000. So for a total of $496.49. And that smudge there, I was just trying to black out. It's a screenshot coming from our forecasting system, which is a reference to another line. So I was just trying to hide that in case anyone asks what that smudges. Any questions on revenues before I go into expenditures? So expenditures, as I presented in September for staffing, for fiscal year 24, we saw an increase of general fund staffing of 24 positions based on additional student needs. And then in fiscal year 25, an additional 25 positions, which are ESSER positions that are coming to the general fund. As those ESSER positions, this is the last fiscal year for ESSER dollars, so any positions that we keep under those will have to be absorbed with the general fund. Healthcare, as we discussed previously, we saw an increase for 24, a 15% increase. Last November, when we were doing the 5-year forecast, we had a 10% increase in there for this year. But in the actuality, a 15% increase occurred, while in past years, for fiscal year 21, we had a 3% increase. 22 was a 1.37% increase. And last fiscal year was 8.7, followed with this fiscal year of 15%. So the point there is that healthcare is volatile at this point. We have, for the out years, increased 10%, but we'll continue to monitor those each year. And that 10% increase is for each year of the forecast. That's increasing 10, so it has a cumulative increase of close to 40% in that last year. Wow. And then in comparison, in the actual years, in fiscal year 20 and 21, the district did experience some cost savings due to school closures. Purchase services, when looking at comparative data, from 21 to 22, it decreased by 1.9 million, and the decrease was due to the fair funding formula being implemented in 22, where the previous pass-through dollars for community schools that we had be recorded on our books are no longer passed through the district, and the state is funding those at 100%. So those pass-through dollars are shown in those fiscal years, but in 2022, you'll see a decrease when those are no longer there. During 24, the forecast assumes that purchase services increased by $562,000, which is due to increased costs and placements for special education placements, instructional service costs, and projected increases for utility costs. And materials supplies is forecasted to increase by $522,000 from 23 to 24, which is due to 23 savings around spent budget, and materials supplies makes up 3.21% of the general fund's operating budget. Just here as a reference, as we talked about these before, I'm not going to go into details, but these are the COVID pandemic dollars that we have occurred in the previous years. The reason I have them in the assumptions is because the historical years are still being shown. And then lastly, we've presented this in the past, but the ESSER funds are not as part of the general fund, but this is what we're spending the ESSER dollars on for the upcoming school, or for this school year. Or this is what was budgeted. Some of these, there has been some changes and some savings. But this is what the ESSER budget has been submitted for. So general fund revenues, in total, our general fund revenues are $88.9 million. How that's broken down, local taxes is our largest source at 74%, or $65.4 million. Projected state funding is 15.8%, and those items are, the fair funding formula is 8.9, the restricted state funding is close to $500,000, and then the state share of local taxes, 6.4. And what that is, if you're familiar with the term as we use in the past of homestead and rollback, the credits that homeowners get that the state reimburses us for. With this year's 5-year forecast, in the biennium budget, they had changed the name to be presented on the forecast from homestead and rollback to state share of local taxes. And then projected all other revenue, $7.5 million. From the other operating funds is 7.4, and other sources is 206, and that mainly from the other sources is the return of advances, that when we advance those dollars out for grant funds in June, they're going to be paid back to the district, and I'll have those on the agenda at the next board meeting. And then the other operating revenues, what those are made up of is $2 million for interest income, about $2 million for interest income, $3.1 million for the TIF payments, the revenue payment in lieu of, special ed catastrophic costs of $500,000, tuition from other districts, $400,000, full day kindergarten tuition of $550,000, and preschool tuition of $130,000. And then in the following slides, I have each revenue source broken down, but just to simplify things, this is all of the revenue sources in one category. But as you can see, this graphic here, when we submit to the state, is without our renewals, and then we do have the one graphic with our renewals. So as you'll see, maybe look at the next slide. As you'll see, the revenues are the top purple line is the renewals, the blue is the property taxes. But what you see in total is that revenues are pretty consistent. There's no year-over-year growth. We might see some incremental changes with interest income. Last year we had budgeted, it was a little slightly over budget. This year we have budgeted $2 million. It's so far we've close to $1 million in interest, so that's something we'll continue to watch. And then tax collections, as I mentioned. Our next tax collections are in January, February, March. So we have that 98% collection rate, and depending on how those go, there could be some swing one way or another there. But for any growth, it's really we'll see what happens in the next biennium budget. This year we received a 2-year increase of $1 million. But overall, as you'll see in comparison to the expenditures, due to House Bill 920 with property taxes, the revenues are pretty consistent year over year. And then this goes to this point too with district tax revenue versus inflation. The graphic on the left shows the annual average annual growth in local property taxes being 4.48%. Then the average annual growth in total revenue of 3.46%, and then the annual inflation rate of 6.12%. The growth in revenue is from the 2019 levy, and as you see, the inflation has the growth in inflation has outpaced our growth in revenue. And then the graphic on the right is the 5-year forecast projection. So within the projection, the average annual growth in revenue is 0.5%, while the projected annual inflation rate is 3.66%. And then the following slides are the revenues by source. Unless, Laura, do you want me to spend some time on each one or just go to expenditures? They're there as a reference or?
Anyone have any questions?
Okay. So moving on to expenditures. So our total expenditures are forecasted at $86.3 million for fiscal year '24. Of that amount, personnel costs make up 83%, for a total projected personnel costs of $71.6 million, with salaries being about $50 million and benefits being $21.7 million. Projected purchase services are $7.5 million, and those are made up of tuition for outplacement students of $1.6 million, utilities, $1.8 million. A 4% increase was forecasted, but currently that's being trended about $164,000 over. That overage is part of the 5-year forecast. Legal is about $300,000. Insurance is about another $300,000. $800,000 for occupational and OT and PT therapists, and then $400,000 for outside transportation, which makes up close to the amount for the purchase services. And then all other expenditures of $7.1 million, which is supplies, capital, general fund debt, operating, transfers and advances, and other uses. Again, this slide is similar to the revenue slide. As you will see here, and what I want to highlight here is the green shadow box. That's the current year. If you look at the prior 3 years, the columns to the left of that, fiscal year '23, it is slightly higher due to that general fund transfer that we did, which is in that yellow box. But if you just look specifically at the blue and orange box, that's salary and benefits. And even from 21 to 22, 22 to 23, those specific expenditures have been increasing, and they will continue to increase, as you will see in 24 to 25, and so on, based on our negotiated agreements, the cost of employees, and the projected increase of the benefits. And this graphic here for the salaries kind of shows that is since 2019 to 23, salaries have been increasing, and that trend will continue from 24 to 28. Same with the benefits. Purchase services, as I mentioned before, in 21 to 22, there was that decrease due to the change in fair funding formula, but since 22 to 23 and 23 to 24, purchase services have been increasing. Utilities are going to continue to increase as well. And just the cost for services has been increasing. Materials and supplies, as I mentioned, this makes up 3% of our budget. The increase from 22 to 23 was, there was an increase from 22 to 23, and then 23 to 24 was partly for unused budget, and then the decrease from 24 to 25. Textbooks falls under materials supplies. Last year we had a $200,000 carryover for this year for the curriculum to purchase the new adoption for this year. So that $200,000 that was unspent was carried into this year, and then for 25, going back to their normal budget, $200,000 less, which was the reason for the decrease. Capital outlay, it's about $1 million. $500,000 of that goes to our technology replenishment of Chromebooks. And our general fund debt, we do have one issue that the last payment is next month of $345,000. So then after that, we'll have one debt issuance left in the general fund. Other objects, that's mostly made up of county auditor fees, insurance, and audit and bank fees, and then other financing source of transfer advances. The graphic is skewed based on last year, that $25 million transfer to the 070 fund. But what I want to highlight for this year is the transfers that are estimated. There's $100,000 for food service if needed, $400,000 for termination benefits fund, summer school, to the summer school fund is $75,000 as we've been increasing those offerings. The annual field turf fund of $54,000. And then what is in here that is a placeholder if one needed is that $750,000 Kisner HVAC placement that we had last year. We pushed it to this year. So that's just in there as a placeholder if we decide to move forward with that project. And again, that's a variable. If we don't move forward with that for this year, that's a savings to the forecast. I just want to be clear with that, that there's variables in there that are assumptions that could or could not happen. So moving on to the general fund summary. This is a new graphic. With this graphic, the blue bar is revenues, the orange graphic, or the orange bar is expenditures. So last fiscal year, the orange exceeded the revenues, but 25 million of that was for the transfer to the 070 fund. Backing that out, the revenues would have been about $8 million higher than the expenditures projected this year. Revenues $2 million higher than the expenditures. And then in 2025, we kind of begin that projected deficit spend. We may realize some savings or changes, but it's trending that way. And then, as you can see in the out years, it's projected that way as well. So what does this mean for the 5-year forecast? This is the forecast that I need to submit to the state. This one shows without the renewals. So for this fiscal year, we ended last fiscal year with $46 million in cash. This year, total revenues of 88.9. Expenditures of 86.3 with revenues over expenses of 2.6 million. Next year, if the renewal is not renewed by November of 2024, next fiscal year, which is 25, is calendar year 24, and the last half of calendar year 24 and the first half of calendar year 25. So in January, that taxes will not be collected. So our revenues will decrease in next school year if not renewed, and then the following years you can see in 26 will be a full renewal, and then in 27 a slightly decrease, and then 2028 that bigger decrease is that second renewal comes into play in fiscal year 2028. So if not renewed in 25, we'll have a deficit spend of 7.1 million, 26 of 15.1, and then so on. And then we could be looking at a cash deficit in 28. If renewed, again, no impact to this year. Next year, our projected, if played out to the forecast of how it is, it could be a deficit of 2.3 million, and then 5.4, 7.4. So, and this is just another graphic that highlight a simplified graphic of what was just showed. Any questions so far?
George, can you go back to that new graphic?
Which one? This one?
That's the one. So again, if all renewals fail, we will project to have, again, we're projecting to have a shortfall of $14 million,
Right.
which we can't do.
Right.
That's the part that I want to be clear on. We cannot get to 2028 and just say, well, we're $14 million and, you know, the little old Strongsville City School District isn't like the federal government where we can take loans.
Right.
We would have to address that well ahead of 2028.
Right. Yeah, as you will see, that spend down of the cash accelerates.
Right.
And then the quicker you get to those out years, the bigger the deficit is, and it's harder to close when you get to those years.
So would it be a safe assumption if the renewals fail, we could potentially have to go back for new money as early as 2026 in order to not get to those negative numbers in '28?
Yeah, we would have to do, if 2026 occurs, and that's what we're facing in 2026, we would have to address something. The state would have identified us. We would at least get a letter from the state saying, hey, your financial stability is not looking sustainable. You have 60 days to develop a plan. What's your plan? And then they can come in, based on what we submit, they can come in and do their own forecast and make a declaration of either, next talking point, of either fiscal caution, fiscal watch, or fiscal emergency. And then to be removed from one of these categories, the school district must demonstrate fiscal stability by eliminating current deficits and avoiding future deficits. I called the auditor's office today to see if I could get a little bit more clarity on that. I didn't receive a call back. They took a message, but I was talking to another treasurer who's been in fiscal emergency in other districts, and just said, hey, how does the state get you out of one of these categories? And the line of the revenue or surplus or deficit, in order for them to get you out, from what I understand, I need to get clarity from them, but you have to show a positive for 5 years. So that has to be in the positive for 5 years before they remove you from those categories, which would make sense that from the last comment, and this is straight from the OD page, to be removed from one of these categories, the school district must demonstrate fiscal stability by eliminating current deficits and avoiding future deficits. And the state doesn't also want to release you and then put you right back in it. They want to make sure you're stable to be released. And then the next graphic is, this is a graphic that I found in the tool, is, so when they put you in one of these categories, it's based on a percentage of deficit spend to revenues, but it's also, the other factor is cash balance as well. You have to be in negative cash, but how quickly you're trending there. So, for example, in 2026, if we had a negative cash as well, we could be facing fiscal caution, and so on with the other categories. But then again, that also has to be correlated with negative cash, but just based on where our revenues or expenditures over revenues are, that's kind of some of the buckets that we could potentially be looking at. And then earlier last year, we did address our cash balance policy, which is stated there, and then we are looking at cash balance on hand. Any balance exceeding over 150 days, the superintendent or the treasurer may make a recommendation of funds be transferred to an 070 capital projects fund for future capital improvements as approved by the board. The transfer must be approved by the board and cannot result in the general fund operating balance falling below 90 days in any year of the rolling 5-year forecast. And then kind of looking at our cash days on hand, in 2019, we were 166 days. And then in 2022, we hit our peak. That's when we made in 2023, we made the transfer. And just as when we went for the 2019 levy, we wanted it to make it last till 2027. So naturally, you see an increase in cash, which we're on the back end of that, which this graphic displays. So by 2027, we'll be at 124 days. So we'll still be above our 90 days. And then in 2028, as you see, we dip below the 90 days. And then this is taken from the Ohio Association of School Business Officials. They did a white paper on cash balances, which was data that was taken from GFOA, Moody's, the State Auditor's Office, that school districts must plan and monitor district cash flow as they practice responsible stewardship. The district's 5-year forecast is an informed prediction for how long the revenue and expense cycle will maintain a healthy cash balance. The revenue of surplus or deficit in line within the 5-year forecast provides a picture of the district's changing financial obligations over time, pointing to the need for a fund balance in preparation for future expenses. Reason why a district may carry a cash balance at the end of the fiscal year, levy cycles. Since levies are limited to a fixed dollar amount, tax revenues may not keep up with increasing costs and operations, particularly when expenditures typically increase 3 to 5% annually. So that goes back to this graphic as you see the influx, then the decrease. Expenditure volatility, staffing needs over the past 2 years alone. General fund staffing increased by 40 positions due to increased enrollment coupled with additional supports for student needs. Healthcare, as we saw over the last 2 years, that's been volatile. We saw an 8.7 increase followed by a 15% increase. And then non-personnel services, just the cost of goods and services continue to increase based on inflation. Things are more expensive than they were the previous year. And then lastly, credit score bond rating. Over the past several years, the district's bond rating has increased 2 credit rating upgrades from Moody's from a A3 to an AA1. As a result of the increased bond ratings, the district was able to refinance outstanding debt at a lower tax rate, which reduced the district's debt obligation by close to $20 million, which is a direct savings of $30 per $100,000 evaluation to the taxpayers over the life of the debt. So that original millage for the bond was 3 mils, now it's down to 2 mils. So that we were able to lower that millage rate. So any questions on the 5-year forecast? The next slides I had was further discussion for the next item for the renewal levy. All right, so transitioning to item 3, the resolution for the renewal levy, to have a discussion on what we want to do next for March. Both resolutions need to be approved. Well, December 20th is the filing date, so working backwards, we have 2 board meetings left, this one and December 7th for resolution 1 and 2, unless we hold another meeting. But issue 14 was a 5-year operating levy initially approved by the voters in May of 2019. The renewal of this operating levy generated about $9.9 million for the district's operating fund if collected at 100%. And renewal is a continuation of a previously approved levy, which means there will be no impact increase to your current taxes. The outcome of the levy, it had failed by 53.84% versus 46.16%. Some of the feedback that we got was, one, the district's cash balance surplus. In addition to, I'll just kind of read the response that we've been given. In addition to the information stated on the previous slide, with inflation increasing expenditures higher than revenue growth, and at the time of the 2019 levy, the Board of Education seeked a millage amount that would last the district through school year 2027 with a positive cash without coming back to the voters for a new millage amount. If this levy is renewed, the district will meet that commitment. It was not known at the time that the district would need to it was known at that time that the district would need to renew the levy in 2023 in order to meet that commitment, as the taxpayers requested it to be a renewal levy at the time. Prior to the 2019 levy, the last time new money levy for operations was approved was in November of 2007, which was over 10 years ago, and then that commitment through 2027 would make it a 10-year or a 20-year period. And just to that cycle, going back to this graphic, was it was known that we would see an increase followed by the spend down. A renewal levy versus smaller levy. Beginning with next fiscal year 25, the district is projected to deficit spend, meaning the district will be spending more money than it is bringing in, which will be a burn through the cash reserves. With annual inflation increases through October, with annual inflationary increases through October, fiscal year-to-date expenditures are 6.45 higher than the previous fiscal year of 2023, and 14.69 higher compared through, that's supposed to be October, then change the language from September, but they're 14.69 higher compared to October of 23, or 22, 22. So let me back up. Compared to last year, they're 6.45 higher. Compared to the previous year, 2 years ago, they're 14.69 higher. So basically, the premise is there that expenses aren't going down, they're continuing to increase. And then district expenditures are projected to increase by 5.67 from the current fiscal year to the next fiscal year in the forecast. Replacing the current levy with a new smaller levy, the district would burn through the cash reserve at a quicker rate. It would need to come back to the voter sooner for new money and or reduce student offerings or opportunities. And then, as mentioned, if the renewal is not renewed by the November 2024 election, collections will end beginning in calendar year '25, which is the second half of next fiscal year. So that concludes turn it over to Laura for discussion.
I was just gonna say and ask, like, is it a fair assumption to say that comparing us to other districts isn't really comparing us to apples? Like, the one slide where you said where we go up, but then we start to, spend down. Everyone could be in a different cycle, is that correct?
Correct, everyone
We're
could be
not
at
all on the
everyone could be
same-
at a different cycle.
Okay.
They might be on the back end of the cycle. Some of that comparative data, some districts might have just gone out for new money, while others are going out for new money during the time. So it depends on where they're at on their levy cycle and where they are with their deficit spend. So it's kind of, if you're looking at that comparative analysis, is compared to look at the whole financial picture, where they were and where they're going, not at a point in time. And I will say too, even for us, whether it's 71 million if you want to count the 070 fund or the 46 million in the general fund, it's not, we don't have those dollars in the bank every day. It's an influx. So we get our collections, property tax is our largest collection, or largest revenue source. We get a $5 million in advance in January. We get close to 20 million in February, another 3 million in February. That gets spent down all the way through July. Middle of July, we get about $10 million. And then in August, we get the rest of it, which is a little over 20 million. And then from that period, from August to middle of January, we get another 5. So the cash flow goes up and it goes down. So having a cash balance there is able to sustain those dips in cash flow. I know Richard was around at the time, but if you go back 10 years ago, the district had to borrow funds in December because that's the lowest, the end of December and the beginning of January, the lowest points in cash, and there's 2 payrolls at that time. So the district was borrowing short-term tax anticipation notes to fund payroll, to wait for that tax advance. So we're not there, but that's one of the reasons why it's important to have that 90 days balance to sustain those dips in cash flows. And also it helps with our investments. We were able to lock in longer term rates. And when you do lock in those longer term rates, those funds are locked up for periods of time, but you're able to generate interest, which is able to provide some of the, is another revenue stream back to the district that's providing opportunities for students. So it's take the cash away, those, that it'll have a correlation to the interest income.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do the motion and then we can discuss?
You want to do the motion?
Okay. So a resolution declaring it necessary to renew the existing 5.9 mil tax levy for the purpose of current expenses and requesting the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to make certain certifications pursuant to 5705.03 and 5705.21 of the revised code.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Kilbane. Discussion?
I'll start. So obviously, this is germane for the board. This is germane for the community. We just came out of November 8th and had issue 14, and certainly for the board and for the administration, we were disappointed with the results. So we have to ask ourselves, what should we do going forward? And I did share with the board and the team some of the results. At our last board meeting, we said we wanted to take the time to get those results. These are preliminary results from the county. At first, I had thought that issue 14 had failed in every precinct in Strongsville. So there is some light. It did pass in 4 precincts. So I know I will be laser focused on trying to find out how that message resonated in the 4 districts, or the 4 precincts rather, and how we spread that message. But ultimately, I think it's important for me to share, we got a lot of messaging that there is a excess amount of money in the general fund, and that somehow that was, compared to other districts, too much money. And I firmly believe, and I think should be said out loud, we don't have an excess amount of money. The thing that resonated with me was the phrase that Georgia's Trade Association used. School officials must plan and monitor as they practice responsible stewardship. And that's how I approach it, and I think that's how the board approaches it. We are stewards of the taxpayers' money. And so, yes, we have a healthy cash balance. If you understand school finances, eventually we run out of money. Anybody can look at inflation right now, anybody can look at the state of economy right now and realize costs are always going up. For school districts in Ohio, like Strongsville, our costs are going up just like everyone else's costs. However, our revenues stay relatively flat, and by law, they're required to stay relatively flat. And so that issue 14 renewal would have collected approximately $9.6 million, which is the same amount it collected back when we passed it originally in 2019. And so, yes, there's a healthy cash balance. That allows Strongsville to do things other school districts can't. And the one that we keep on coming back to is the one when we refinanced the bonds, we saved the taxpayer $20 million. And yeah, it might only equate to $30 per $100,000. It's $20 million. Everything is going to be a few dollars for each individual taxpayer that adds up to the lifeblood of the district. And so I want our message to be other school districts in Ohio should be talking to George and talking to Cameron and talking to Strongsville about how they can practice responsible stewardship of taxpayers' money, because that's the healthy thing to do. That's what we're doing here in Strongsville for our students, and I would suggest that's what other school districts want to do. One of the things that, as a board, we decided back in 2019 is our community doesn't like to have to come every 3 to 5 years and pass a new money levy. And so as a board, we were practical and said, well, if that's the case, what amount do we need to be able to commit, to promise to the taxpayer that we are going to make this money last 8 years? And I was here, and the other board members were here, and we said, we're going to commit to 8 years, and we're going to do our darndest to make it last 10 years and more. Part of that promise was renewing the levy. So it's really difficult to make a levy last 10 years if it fails halfway through. And that sounds almost silly with the amount of common sense involved, but that's part of the equation. And as a board, we were comfortable saying we will come to the taxpayer and prove our worth. We will earn their investment each and every time. So we failed in November, but anytime I, as a board member, come to the public and say it's time for us to ask for a renewal or new money, I have a 3-part test. Some of you have been around a long time are bored with this 3-part test, but I'll share it for the newbies. Number 1, is it needed? We have no business asking the taxpayer for continued money or new money unless we can tell them it is needed. And the renewal, it won't be issue 14 next time, but the renewal of this levy is needed. It's $9.6 million. I've been doing this long enough. I remember, like George, having to get payday loans to make payroll. I remember budgeting was real easy. We should buy this. We don't have the money. No. That's it. It was really easy to budget back then. $9.6 million is approximately 10% of our budget. It is needed. Second part of my test is it reasonable? We could argue we should have a 20 mil levy. We should have a 30 mil levy. It's not reasonable. It would not be reasonable for ourselves to pay that increase in taxes. It would not be reasonable to expect the voting taxpayer to shoulder that kind of burden. A renewal levy, almost by definition, is reasonable. We're already paying it. We are respectfully asking the taxpayer to continue paying it. So it passes part 2, is it reasonable? And then the third part of my test is, can I look every voting taxpayer in the eye and promise we will not waste their money? And that, to me, is a promise of character. That's a promise of integrity. Anybody who knows me for a long period of time or a short period of time, I cannot stand wasting money. I cannot stand wasting time. I cannot stand wasting resource, whether it's mine, my children's, or the taxpayers. And so I can always stand up and say, we will not waste your money, because that, again, our 3-part test on our decisions is academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, which is another fancy way of saying responsible stewardship. So the levy, the renewal of this levy passes my 3-part test, which is why I'm comfortable voting yes and comfortable having that conversation with the tax-paying voter to earn their trust and ultimately earn their investment. And the last thing I will share is that if I put myself in the voter's shoes, they want to make sure they're making a wise investment. And to fail a levy so that in 3 years they have to come back and pass a larger increase, I would share with any tax-paying voter, any investor, you can either spend $20 a year for 5 years and come up with $100, or you can do a balloon payment. But if you do a balloon payment in year 5, it's not going to be $100. It's going to be more than $100. So renewing this levy is ultimately the wisest decision a taxpayer can make. I think I've said enough. I hope my passion has come through. This is important for our tax-paying voter. They're our customer. That customer wants value out of every dollar they spend, and this renewal represents that. Any other decision, in my estimation, is penny wise, pound foolish.
Does anyone want to add anything? Very well said, Rich. And
Thank you.
I have a question, George. Correct me if I'm wrong, because this is what I heard you say based on all your graphs. If we don't renew the 2019 levy, we're trying to run this district in the year 2023 on the amount of money we got approved in 2007.
Correct.
Correct.
Well, that would be the last.
The last new money.
The last, was there?
That was
That's
2007
correct.
was
Yeah,
the
that
last
is
time.
correct.
And
I
I
just
knew there
wanted
was
to,
another levy mixed in there
Great.
somewhere.
That's a very
I
good
just
point.
wanted to put that in perspective because I have a son in 8th grade, so he'll be a high school student next year. He was not born in the year 2007. So the thought of running a district on the amount of money that we got approved in 2007, I just can't wrap my mind around that. That's a lot of years. That's a lot of expenditures increases. It's a lot of inflation. It's a lot of flat income that I don't see how anyone can run their household on the same amount of money that they made in 2007. So Rich, you were very eloquent, but I heard the same thing, given that report, that we need this renewal levy. And defeating it again is only going to put us in a bind very quickly.
Thank you. That's a great point. Any other questions or comments?
How much does it cost to put a levy up if we have to, I really don't know this answer, if we'd have to put a new levy up? How much does it cost the district to do that every time?
It varies. It depends on the number of local issues on the ballot, and that total cost then is divided based on the
Oh, I see, okay.
various local issues, but it could be anywhere from 5,000 to 40,000, depending on the number of issues. And that's not any campaigning cost. That's just the cost from the Board of Elections. The county invoices the school district for
Right,
placing it
that's
on
what
the
I
ballot.
mean, yeah, so that it's not like we just send in our thing and say, hey, we're gonna have a
Right.
levy. Okay, because that's even extra money.
Yeah.
Okay.
we send it in, and then they send us a bill afterwards.
Yeah.
Something like that. They just deduct it out of our tax collections.
Any other questions or comments? Well, again, Rich, I appreciate your passion. You said it eloquently and perfectly, and I couldn't have said it better myself. And Michelle, I love the perspective that you brought, and that was a really great question too, Sharon, so thank you. George, thank you so much for adding the slides. That every little bit of information really helps. So with that, I guess we can do the roll call.
Yeah. And then just this is the first of two resolutions. So what this resolution does is, it authorizes me to send it to Cuyahoga County, to the Budget Commission, to get certification of what the renewal levy generates, and then bringing that back to the December 7th meeting for the second half, which officially authorizes us to put on the ballot to file with the Board of Elections.
Great.
Right.
Okay.
So with that, Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
Mr. Miko,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes,
Mrs. Bissell.
Yes.
motion passes.
And the next item I have is grant approvals. We have two SCF grants. One is for a privacy folder at Kinsner for $320 by first grade teacher Corey Plotz. And then the second one is for Whitney classroom carpet for $325 for Amanda Russ. And then the last one is a GPD Employees Foundation grant that Ms. Green from Curriculum applied for $9,349 to be used for instructional supplies and materials. Right, and then no questions. Moving on to the next item. New fund for fiscal year '24. Student managed student activity count for the high school for Science National Honor Society. Number 6 is the budget purpose and goals for that National Science Honor Society for the high school of $4,200, and it is a student activities account, so those funds will be raised within the group and spent within the group. Item 7 is amendments to the permanent appropriation schedule, and the changes are for the grant approvals and the National Science Honor Society Fund. The next item, number 8, is be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the district participates in the Cuyahoga County Real Property Tax Advance Program. This includes requests for advances of and tax revenues collected in calendar year '24. Again, this is an annual resolution required by the county. As I mentioned with the 5-year forecast, or the 5-year forecast, or the renewal discussion, where we receive our property tax collections in January, February, March, and again in July and August. March and August are the settlement dates, but this resolution allows the county to send the advances in July, or in January and February, and again in July. So it just helps for cash flow. And then item 9 is be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the medical and prescription premiums of SCA for Medical Mutual be approved as presented in the exhibit effective January 1, 2024. With the approval of their collective bargaining agreement in the summer, one of the changes in that agreement was changes in deductibles, which had a correlation effect with changes in premium. Because of deductibles run based on a calendar year, it was best to make this change at the beginning of the calendar year, so that's why that's being included in the agenda. And then the last one is the dental insurance. This is for the entire district. This is based on a calendar year. That be resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the dental premiums for 2024 be approved as presented in the exhibit, effective January 1, 2024. The rate is presented at a 9% increase in premium from the previous year. So with that concludes my report.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it. That was
Thanks.
a very thorough 5-year forecast.
Thanks.
And thanks for all your financial stewardship and leading us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Iba.
Thank you, Ms. Hausum. I'm going to ask Amanda Donlin and Gail Kestner to come up to the podium. So as they're coming up, we have a calendar committee, and these are two representatives that worked with us on the calendar committee. So I'm going to turn it over to them to give you an update on the process we went through and what the draft calendars are looking like.
These are the people who were on the committee, of which Amanda and I were both. One thing that we had to take into account was new contractual language. One of the big things was that the elementary was not, in the prior, we did not have a records date anywhere near our report cards, because we're on trimesters, and 6 through 12 is on the semesters and quarters. And so one thing that was in there is that we needed to have a record-keeping day within 10 days of the ends of the trimester, so that was one thing in the contract language. We also went from, this was the first year in 6 years that the staff is going 186 days. And there's 6 days of professional development. We kept in, it's 1 day of record keeping, which in some cases is split half and half, so that you had that. And then I think that was most of the big changes. We still have 2 parent-teacher conference days, but there was a parent-teacher conference committee that met, of which Amanda was a member, so I'm gonna let her talk about the next slide and how that changed. I think that was the most significant contract language.
We did meet at a different agenda for the parent-teacher conferences, and the group decided that the fall conferences seemed to be the most important and the most impactful for the parents. One thing they had requested is that instead of doing 2 half-days, that we incorporate 1 full day of conferences into the fall and another half-day. So that way we would only have 1 half-day in the spring based on the feedback of that. And the other conversation was that a lot of parents within the school district have children in more than one school. I know myself at one point had them in all 3. So one of the hardships was trying to get to a half-day conference and do it for 3 different schools. So one, by doing it a full day, it adds a little bit more time you can schedule. And the second part of it we discussed was separating those days from both elementary and the middle school, high school, as not to have you having to decide which school you wanted to be able to participate in. So that was something else we added into this calendar conversation.
Just some other additional considerations. Cameron had given us some guidelines to try to always have a 3-day school week. We always, and the committee did talk about that the high school does and middle school likes to end the semester at the winter break so that they don't have those exams kind of being held over their heads. The spring break, we are in agreement with Polaris for that, so we do the same one as theirs. And then we try to have the semesters and trimesters divided evenly among close to 180 days. So given all that, and this was more than it has been considered in the past, there were some new additions. So we had 2 different meetings, and then so we kind of got all those parameters, and then 3 different groups worked on it, so that there was 3 different sets of people just coming up with different things. Cameron did a lot, so thanks to him, because even when we turned it in, none of the 3 groups, he got called out, but none of the 3 groups had a full thing, so he did some math for us and plugged in some things and got it finished, so we appreciated his help with that, with the actual draft. And then some of the highlights is that we do indeed have 176 school days. Did you want to go over some of these?
Sure, if you want me to, yeah. We had the 176 school days. We did push our start and end dates back just a little bit. There was a lot of conversation about that. A lot of things the committee discussed was the fact that we're just inching closer and closer to the beginning of August instead. And I know we're really trying to end by that Memorial Day, but with these 186 or 176 school days we were trying to fit in, it just wasn't working without taking away of a lot of things. So we did actually push the calendar back. That's our recommendation, is to push it back past Memorial Day, but that has us starting closer to the second to last week of August this coming year and the following year to make that work.
Yep,
absolutely.
We're also coming upon, this is the year in May that it's the earliest that Memorial Day can ever be. So the way with the new additions and different days and stuff like that, we came up with finishing in May 30th, but it was just not possible to finish before Memorial Day like we have in the past. And the parents I think parents felt a lot stronger about going as far into August as we could. So we do have 4 teacher days before their PD days. There was one day in the contract that teachers wanted in their room, and then the convocation day. So we ended up putting a lot more teacher days in the beginning of August and being able to kind of push the student days back to the 19th, which is a Monday. So it kind of kept them out of the actual mid-August like it was this year.
And at the same time, we tried to, especially from the parent side of it, tried to pay a little bit more attention to how schedules work out with the kids at home. You know, it's really hard when you're coming into a holiday, you know, Christmas holiday, and you're splitting up the weeks. So we really tried to focus on making, especially at the elementary school level, the complete weeks being off instead of a Wednesday to a Thursday. Another thing we recommended was adding a PD day actually the day before Election Day. So instead of coming back on Wednesday, being off again on Tuesday, and, breaking up that week like that, trying to be mindful of trying to double up our days off already. One, to give the parents an opportunity to either be home with the kids, or 2, not to have the back and forth and convenience of being a little bit more predictable in the schedule. And then the one other thing that we did have a little different this year, especially when we're talking about the conference days, is there are different days that the schools would be in session. The elementary schools would actually be in session on a day. The 6th through 12 grades wouldn't be, and vice versa, so that we can accomplish those full-day conference days and have the parents the opportunity to attend both if they wanted.
Right, and then with that, when you talked about the conferences, so instead of doing, it's still 2 conference days on the teacher contract, but it becomes 1.5 in the fall, so that there can be the full day in one night, and then just a night one in the winter one. It also went with a lot of teachers. We're having trouble getting in. A lot of parents like to meet the new teacher and talk about things in the fall, and I know, speaking for a lower grade, we really like to make sure that the parents see, hear us and are able to talk about things. So we felt that that was good on the teacher end too, to be able to have enough time in the fall when it's more critical to meet everyone and kind of set the tone for the year and get to know families. And so where we have days, so one of the things is that, I know you spoke about that sometimes parents, especially with elementary, with those broken up winter breaks, she said that a random Friday, is so hard when I'm going to have my kids off for the next 2 weeks. And I said, oh, really? Because in elementary, we don't do any records on that day before winter break. Only the upper grades have to. And so and so we said, Dr. Ryba, do we all have to go to school on the same day? And he said, not really. So that was a change in here. There are some days that are just 6 through 12 will be attending, and K to 5 is not. And we thought with the childcare situation that was, so we worked really well together. Like, it really kind of came to fruition. So we think it reflects really well on the teacher parts. And then we didn't talk, the winter and spring breaks. The spring break, we do have to go with Polaris. And then the winter break goes, I think the way it falls is like it goes from like a Friday, like 2 full weeks to a Monday. There's no midweek, and that ends up being on both. And then there was one discrepancy for the 2024-25 that the new teacher dates are even earlier. They're August 5th and 6th instead of the 8th and the 9th. Is the draft on this one, or do you have it?
George, if you can put up the calendar.
Because I didn't, yeah. And then, did you have any questions? I think those were,
Do you want to scroll down, or is it?
Yeah, so as they shared, they've highlighted a lot of those. So when you see those orange days, those are the days where we're talking about we'll have, some kids will be in school, some kids won't. The only thing that, just to share is, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, George, is high school commencement is in yellow. That is because we are still finalizing it with the change to going to the Friday after Memorial Day. There's all these minimum hours. We're still calculating all those, making sure we're good to go. So that's consistent with the pattern we started last year of having it the Sunday before Memorial Day. We just have to see with now that we're going the week or the Friday after if that still works. So if you see that in yellow, And we'll share that when we share it with our parents. It's still a draft. So any questions for Gail or Amanda, or anything you've thought of in the pause that you want to share?
Thank you guys for all your hard work.
You're welcome.
That was
Thank
probably
you
one of
for
my
your time.
first committees that I ever served on, when my kids were in elementary.
It
I
took me
loved.
30 years to get on this
Oh
committee.
my gosh, it was one of my favorite committees to ever be on. Well, everybody with their pencils, adding up the days at the top of the calendars, and so. But I like the uniqueness that you brought to it and the different ideas. I know it can be a lot of work, and
Yeah, and it was kind of cool, because there were times where Amanda made a statement, I was like, oh, yes, my sister is a mom, and that makes sense. And it was one of the times, and I told the elementary, I go, we will never have conferences on a party day again. Because I am gonna make sure that happens twice. That is not going to happen, I promise you that. So we thought it worked better for both parents and staff.
yeah, it's great to see some fresh ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I
Thank
just want
you.
to share thanks to Gail and to Amanda and the entire committee that came together. Yeah, there was so many changes this year compared to years past, and they did a great job working towards it, even though nobody could count to 186.
Yeah,
That's right.
The funniest part is that was the one that all three groups couldn't come up with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sorry, it's just a mental block.
Yeah.
Dr. Ryder,
We-
we just can't get that 186.
We got there.
We didn't want to write it down.
We got it there. So where we go next is, based on law that was passed a while ago, we have to have at least this is our public hearing for the calendar, we have to have a 30-day waiting period, and then the board can officially take action. So what will happen, there'll be a staff and parent update that will go out. It will share the draft calendar that was presented. It will share a survey link to give feedback on that. We share that with the board. And then in the first meeting of January, in consideration of that feedback, you'll either adopt the calendars as presented, we'll have finalization of commencement, or you'll take into consideration their feedback and make any adjustments. The decisions you have is you can make those adjustments yourself, or you can direct the committee to get back together, take that feedback and come back. And we've done both of those in the past. So any questions on next steps? All right.
Cameron, I was just going to suggest, by law, we have to send the calendars to Polaris and Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
But we also have the parochial schools that our calendars affect, so can we at least as a courtesy send the calendars to them? And
Absolutely.
make sure they're copacetic, and then I'm assuming this will be on the website for parents to review?
We don't put this one on the website yet. We can if you want. The challenge we have is people ignore the draft and it becomes official. So we will send it out in an email. Everybody will have access to it. But I get a little concerned about putting stuff on the website because people miss that draft piece and start scheduling. This is the time of year where we start scheduling vacations, so. that's
Yeah, I
what
like
we-
the idea of just crowdsourcing it, because sometimes someone says, oops, and
Yeah.
the team hasn't
Right.
considered it.
Yeah, we'll send it out to everybody. And I know you don't have homework, but you do have things to do. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you both. Yeah. Moving on to business services, we do have one item: be it resolved upon my recommendation that the operations manager be authorized to purchase through the Ohio School Boards Association, 3-year from January 1st, 2024 to 2027, position bonds policy for the listed positions. Total prepaid cost for the 3-year administrative and supplemental bonds, which includes a 15% discount per year, not to exceed $2,283, funding from the general fund. George, you did a nice job explaining what these bonds do for our folks.
Yeah, so these positions that are listed handle cash. So they're, every 3 years, they have to be bonded. And this is just the amount that they're bonded for based on the cash that they could potentially be handling. So if something happens to those people in that position, or if they do something with the cash, that they're bonded for the amount to protect the district.
Any questions on that item?
Are the amounts an industry standard, a government regulation, or how do we compute?
Working with, drawing a blank on the insurance company that these are through, working with them on their recommendation too, based on what we also see that day-to-day goes through some of these positions.
So we analyzed the risk per position
Yeah.
and acted accordingly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Moving on to curriculum, we have recommendation of an out-of-state trip. Be it resolved upon my recommendation that permission be granted to the Strongsville High School boys and girls varsity basketball teams to travel to Knightstown, Indiana to participate in basketball competition December 20th through 21st, 2023. Transportation will be via chartered motor coach and expenses will be paid by fundraising activities. Any questions on that trip? We have no items under student services, and so next I'll turn over to our Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Pelko, with the HR report for this month. Jenny?
Thank you. Under Human Resources this month, I have the following items for your consideration. Under L1, we have the resignation for non-certificated staff. Under number 2, we have the resignation of non-certificated staff athletic supplemental contract. Under 3, we have 2 certificated retirements. Under number 4, appointments for certificated staff. 5, appointments for non-certificated staff. Under 6, appointment for home instruction tutor. 7, appointment for administrative substitute. Under 8, appointment for certificated substitute. Under 9, appointments for non-certificated substitutes. Under number 10, we have our appointments for our game workers. Under 11, appointments for certificated athletic supplemental contracts. Under 12, appointments for non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts. 13, changes in hours for non-certificated staff. 14, change in status for non-certificated staff. Under 15, leave of absence for administrative staff. 16, leaves of absence for certificated staff. 17, leaves of absence for non-certificated staff. Under 18, we have unpaid leaves for certificated staff. 19, unpaid leave for non-certificated staff. 20, we have volunteers. And finally, under 21, we have a memorandum of understanding. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the memorandum of understanding between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Strongsville Education Association, as stated in the exhibit, be accepted. And that concludes my report, unless you have any questions.
You want to highlight what the MOU is about?
Sure, I can highlight the MOU. So, working last year when we had negotiations with the Education Association, we had a separate committee where we worked on our supplementals. I don't think that they have been touched in, I can't even remember when. So we worked at that, and through that process, we developed a process if there was a new supplemental that wanted to be proposed by, our staff or just in general, that what would that look like? What would that process look like? So what it looks like is they have to fill out, we have a lot of questions. Part of it is we look at sustainability, we look at enrollment into the supplemental, and, interest into it over a period of time. And so after that, and after they share a lot of information with us, we met again and looked at everything and decided that boys volleyball was something that has been going on in our district for the last 2 years. We've seen an increase in enrollment and interest in the sport. We also look at, is there feasibility to play somewhere and other teams to play, and that has been also proven. So therefore, this is what this memorandum of understanding is saying, is that we are going to officially request that boys volleyball at a high school head coach and a high school assistant coach be added to the supplemental schedule. And this would be not only for next year, or not only for this year, but moving forward in the future as well.
So thanks for that detailed explanation, and the exciting thing is if approved, this would add another sport to the sports we offer, as boys volleyball would become that sport. Any questions for Jenny?
Can we make a note to bring a report back? I'm sure Denny will bring a report, but it's a new sport. We'll probably want to pay closer attention. I just want the schedule so I know when to show up to watch a game.
I know they were intramural last year, but I saw a lot of pictures on social media, and it looked like they were having a lot of fun.
Yeah, that'll be good. Mr. Binkley, I don't want to steal your thunder for your technology report. You want to do it, or you want me to do it for you? Okay. All right. I know, right? You only have like 3 a year, but, no, you sit down and relax. I'll take care of it for you. So be it resolved upon my recommendation that the Strongsville Board of Education enters into a consulting agreement with the Educational Funding Group for the E-rate funding years 24, 25, 25, 26, and 26, 27. Scope of services provided by EFG includes technology review, form preparation, competitive bidding, participation in USAC review process, post-commitment actions, document retention, E-rate compliance, and legal matters. All of this to say this company helps us to do all the things we need to do to be compliant with E-rate to get the rebates and the funding that we get through E-rate. All right. Any questions on that one? No? Okay, hearing none, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Takes us to item N on our agenda, report on Polaris Career Center. Michelle?
Thank you. Polaris does not have a November meeting. Typically, we had a really lovely dinner down at Capitol Conference last week where we got to spend some time just hanging out and getting to know each other better. So I really enjoyed that. So thank you to Polaris for providing that opportunity. 2 other things of note tonight. The Polaris Explorer Club, which I've mentioned before. That's an opportunity after school, December 5th and 6th, and December 12th and 13th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. on Polaris' campus for students in grades 4 through 6. The last day to register is tomorrow, and it is almost full. I looked specifically, there are spots still available in Jewelry Junction, Sweet Holiday Kitchen, which is, my kids are cooking, I can't wait to taste the treats, Tiny House Workshop, and Tool Time. So if you have students that might be interested in those slots, check it out tonight. And one more thing, this is super exciting. If you've been watching the news at all or following cleveland.com, this was highlighted there as well. But as of November 3rd, it was released that Polaris received an $11.6 million grant, expansion grant from the state. A couple of things to note about this. These competitive grant funds were made available as part of the state's biennial budget. In total, the state legislature set aside $200 million for career technical facility expansion. So we applied, 59 grant proposals were submitted. Ours was one of 35 to be funded. And what we are going to do with this funding is create 3 new in-demand programs: engineering technology, robotics, and automation. So when this is completed, there'll be a 20,000 square foot manufacturing center that will house 3 state-of-the-art labs and classroom spaces. So we're really excited about this opportunity. There were administrators in Polaris who had been envisioning this for a long time, didn't have the funds to do it. So we were very fortunate for their leadership when this opportunity became available. They were able to write this grant proposal very, very quickly. The turnaround time was very short. So congratulations to Polaris on this amazing receipt of a grant, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what this looks like and what other opportunities it provides for our students. That concludes my report.
Very exciting. Do they know when they're going to break ground, or is it too soon?
A little too soon.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Good for them. Report on legislation. Rich?
Just 2 updates for the community. One, the Department of Education and Workforce actually had their first meeting this morning at 9 a.m. And it was a inaugural or initial meeting, so there were a lot of welcome and updates on how the Department of Education and Workforce will operate. There was a rather lengthy budget implementation update about the 2-year biennium budget. Fortunately, it is on the state's public internet. It's live streamed, but you can also watch it afterwards. So those of us who are policy wonks will look forward to watching it. I downloaded the presentation, and it's just a short 78 pages of slides on the biennium budget. So more to follow on that. And then in addition to that, the State Board of Education did announce their deadlines for interviews for filling the state superintendent position. And so they hired a consulting company to organize the candidates. That was November 15th. The deadline for interested candidates to apply is November 26th, and then the State Board of Education will do interviews, and hopefully by December 18th, we will have a person in that position. There's been quite a long time where that position has been open, causing a vacuum of leadership, so it'll be good to have that position filled. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. Moving on to board liaison reports, the city council. Rich, back to you.
It seems like it's been a really long time, perhaps hours, since city council met yesterday. And at that meeting, the mayor did give his thanks to the community for their support for the lighting on the square. It was well attended. There were some very important special VIP guests, initials SC, who were in attendance. Somehow the mayor has a special hotline to Santa Claus, and he will accept emails if anybody needs to send Santa Claus a message. I've already sent my request asking for forgiveness and put me back on the good list. But that ultimately it was a great event. It was a nice event for the community, and the mayor did thank all the sponsors. It is entirely funded by community sponsors. And he did, I'll echo his request. He did point out that they are frugal and they like to buy the stuff for the square in January when prices are, let's just say, more advantageous. So if anyone wants to donate for that event, now is the time to actually do that so they can make the purchases in January. And then the other thing I'd like to do is give a heartfelt shout out and congratulations to brain hiccuping Dean, Eric Dean. I knew it was Dean, but I knew it wasn't his first name. Eric Dean, who is Director of Finance for the city, received excellence in financial reporting from Secretary Faber's office for his CAFR. So I'm sure George will be able to give him a call and congratulate him, and they can, George will ask him how many years in a row he got it, and George will remind him how many more years in a row George has received the award.
7.
But
Oh, my
how many? Well, that's how many years you've received it, but that's not how many years more. You'll have to generate a spreadsheet to compute that number.
Yeah, I think the cities have it. The city's been doing CAFR longer, so.
I will wait for your report to come back. But again, congratulations, and although we have a little bit of fun with it, it is important for the community to know that every penny counts because we count every penny. And Secretary Faber, we appreciate his acknowledgement of our excellence in reporting. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next, Strongsville Education Foundation, Sharon.
The only thing I have is thank you to everyone who came to their casino night, November 11th. I wasn't able to attend, but I heard that it went off really great. These people spend a lot of time, and their effort, always amazes me. They do a lot for the kids. I think we just agreed on grants tonight here. So I encourage everyone to continue to look on their pages for what's next. I think they're pretty happy this won't be till next year again, but I just want to thank everyone that for their effort and everyone who attended. That concludes my report.
And if I remember correctly, I read that they raised over $20,000 at casino night, so it was very well attended.
That was the one thing I couldn't find on there.
I feel like I read
was
that on their
looking.
social media
Yeah.
page, so.
Well, good for them.
Yeah, it was a lot of
They
fun.
worked hard.
Yeah, thank you. Strongsville PTA Council, Michelle or Sharon?
Me.
Okay.
The only thing they have is the holiday luncheon, which is at Meadowood, which will be December 7th. Those invitations will go out. And they have a fundraiser on December 1st for 7th and 8th graders, which I think this sounds really cool. I think I said it last time. It's called Neo Extreme. It's on Carpenter Road in Brunswick. It's from 6 to 9. They are looking for more people to help volunteer. I think they don't have a problem getting the kids, but they really do need chaperones. So if anyone is listening and hears this and you would love to chaperone, it's December 1st. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, board committee reports. Finance Committee. Sharon?
Well, that would be.
You've been busy.
Yeah. I could go over the Finance Committee again, but we've been over the 5-year forecast, like, let's see, our meeting was November 16th, and now we're back again today. I want to really, really thank you, George, because you've put in your heart and soul to this. And the only thing I have to say is we went over this on the Finance Committee. You know, as we voted, we're resolute on bringing this levy back again, this renewal. And I just want to say, please, please, if you have questions, if you don't understand something, there's a lot of information here. And if you're not a finance major, and I certainly am not, but I'm becoming one because I keep looking at these numbers, ask somebody, reach out to one of us. If we don't have the answer, we'll bug George. Please reach out. We're not here to take anyone's money. We're here to support the kids. And I hate to see, my heart will be broken if after COVID, we have to start cutting things again. These kids have missed enough for 3 years. I say we owe it to them to, let's just keep going. So that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything, George?
No, I think we had a good turnout. We went over a lot of the same slides that were presented tonight. A lot of people there, a lot of questions from both sides. So I think we had good dialogue and discussions, and
Yeah.
it's good to see everyone that came out to hear the information and to have the dialogue.
We don't know when we're having another one, right?
No, to be determined based on
Okay.
any issues that we need to address or anything that comes up. So.
Okay.
I was able to attend as well, and I agree. The turnout was a great questions, good dialogue, so thank you. And couldn't have said it better myself, Sharon. Thanks. Policy Committee, Michelle or Haley?
You can go.
Well, we had a very riveting policy committee meeting yesterday where we argued over hyphens and fundraising. But in all seriousness, we
And
really had a.
abbreviations.
What's that?
And abbreviations.
And yes, exactly. And sometimes that's what it is. It's minute things, and sometimes it's, bigger items like, if we're gonna keep Narcan on the premises, for example. So we did get a lot of good work done. There'll be some of those things coming to full board discussion in the next couple of months, so keep your eye out for those full discussions, and then we'll end up with first and second readings, thereafter. So thank you to the committee. We had great attendance yesterday. We had all union reps present, which was fantastic. It's great to see them involved, and so that concludes my report.
Thank you. Facilities Committee. You want me to go? Okay. We did have a meeting last week for our facilities. We ironed out where our lacrosse youth program will be practicing in the coming year. They'll be up at Albion, maybe using the old Allen property every once in a while, but majority of their time will be spent up at the Albion site. We also discussed the bond issue and just threw around the ideas of, what we wanted to do with that in light of the renewal levy failing. Everyone pretty much agreed that we would push the bond issue off and focus on the renewal levy. And that concludes that report. Business Advisory Committee.
We had a meeting this past Friday, November 17th. We did some speed networking conversations between teachers and staff and business people in the community. Some of the questions we talked about were, what skills are you finding hardest to teach a student or an employee on both ends? What are you seeing, what are you not seeing? What skills do you look for in interviews that make applicants stand out from others? A lot of what the teachers said, they felt that after talking to the business owners or the business associates in the community, that their feelings were validated in what they were seeing in the classroom. And we talked about the importance of people taking initiative, being kids, or right now living in a world of immediate gratification, where sometimes people can't take feedback the right way, or they can't take it in a positive way. And feedback is a positive thing, feedback is a good thing. And it's okay to fail, because failing means that you're actually trying. If you don't fail, you haven't tried at all. But failing shows that you are trying something. You want to fail early, adapt, form teams and work together. We also talked about the fact that doing activities in a public forum, the importance of doing stuff like that as a kid. Whereas then when you go into the real world for the first time and you get feedback or you get corrections or you get any kind of critiques, it's not taken offensively. So it's important to be able to take corrections and feedback from your peers in the classroom, from adults. And we also talked about the fact that teachers have to take feedback on a daily basis from their students and from their peers and from parents. And our next meeting is going to be February 9th, right here at 7:30 in the morning. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is our adoption of consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in this agenda denoted as type dash action, consent, which items constitute the consent calendar, are adopted by one single motion unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests that such items be removed from the consent calendar and voted upon separately. Do we have anything that needs removed? No, hearing none.
I just want to note one thing. One of the exhibits has an old letterhead on it.
Okay.
Before I sign it, we're just going to change the letterhead. Nothing
Okay.
on the content changes, but that way it doesn't have to come back to board in the future.
Okay, gotcha. Do we don't need to remove that or anything? You're just.
No, I'm just going to
making-
update the, just
Got it.
wanted to note that we talked about, we're going to
Okay.
update the letterhead and then
Got
we'll sign the agreement and
Okay.
send it in.
Sounds good. All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Kilbane. George, can you take the roll?
Ms. Stavcek?
Yes.
Ms. Cobain?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
And Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Ryba for superintendent's timely information.
Thank you so much. George will put the slides on the board. So always good to highlight a few things that are going on around the district. The first one, we're going to go to Kinsner, fourth grade. They just finished a unit on figurative language, and so they were learning about idioms, and they got to dress up as, or dress as their idiom, and then their other classmates got to guess. So I know it's late on it's a Tuesday before Thanksgiving, but let's see how we do. Let's start with the left, the young lady at the left. Can you see what she has in her hands?
Grapes.
Grapes. So what do we think that idiom is?
Heard it through the grapevine.
Heard it, Michelle's 1 for 1. Okay, the next, she's got a basket there. Don't get thrown off by SpongeBob.
Don't
Eggs
put
in
all
a
your eggs in
basket?
one basket.
Don't put your eggs all in one basket?
I think that's it, or chickens before, I think it's the eggs in one basket one. Okay.
Don't put your SpongeBob in a basket.
I can't remember if it was chickens before they hatch or,
Chickens before they're hatched.
yeah, I think that may be it.
We were
Okay.
way off.
Yeah, we were.
She's counting, that is it, see? But that was such a good guess, it threw me off. All right, so the young man behind her, what do you think that one is? Leaves. Turning over,
Turning over a new leaf.
turning over a new leaf.
Or two.
The last two are easy, though.
The young lady,
It's raining cats and dogs.
okay, and the last one?
Skeletons in your closet.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Ms. Bissell, if we have game night,
Yeah, you
you're
don't want me to.
you're on my team.
I just want you to know, when I saw figurative language, this is not what I thought.
But what a great job the teachers did. I mean, taking a topic like figurative language that you could just kind of say, okay, here's the idioms, but bringing it to life, having the kids be creative and really think through what it means is a great example of what the teachers bring to life for our students in these lessons. Moving on to the middle school, we're going to highlight 8th grade. One of our math teachers, Ms. Blackman. Desmos is a technology program that we use. It's got advanced calculator applications within it. So they were looking, as you could see on kind of the scatter plot and line graph there, of what is the correlation between hand size and the amount of starburst that you could grab. And the cool thing is LeBron James recently did this. And so they were able to take a look at, hey, with a hand span of 23.5 centimeters, he was able to grab 38 starbursts. And where did they, I'm assuming he's the little outlier dot up there at the top of the graph. But he is, so they were able to compare that. So again, taking a look at using the program, looking at the formula there, I think that's a slope application. So to be able to plot this data, see what the slope is there, and kind of do that in a fun and engaging way. So another example of how our teachers are bringing the content to life and applying great skills as they map this out, work collaboratively, and have a fun opportunity to compare it to LeBron's hand. And then finally, going into the high school, Miss Ward, one of our science teachers at the high school, held a Google Meet with research scientists aboard the EV Nautilus. So this Nautilus, there are currently outside of Hawaii mapping unmapped portions of the Pacific Ocean. So the kids in the class were able to, they did some pre-work, kind of a virtual tour of the ship, looking at the research of careers that are aboard of that and underwater life in the area. But again, taking something that you can learn in a textbook or learn in some slides and talk to somebody that's doing the exact work. And as it says there at the bottom, learning about the ocean floor, learning about plate tectonics, learning how Hawaii is constantly evolving and growing because of plate tectonics that's there, and talking to people actually doing the work was a great opportunity that she provided to our students. And then finally, the last slide, I'm not going to read through all of them, but we have plenty of holiday concerts in store, starting on Tuesday, December 5th, and ending on Wednesday, December 20th, from our high schools to our middle schools to our elementary schools, whether it's orchestra, choir, or band. They're great opportunities to see some wonderful, talented musicians perform and sing. So please go out and check it out. And they will be live streamed. All of them, Scott, we're going to be able to live stream. So we'll be able to live stream all of those on SCS TV. So if you can't catch it live, you can catch it on our website live as well as on demand throughout that time period moving forward. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Item T, Board of Education Other. We do have one item of business here, Polaris Career Center, appointment of a one-year rotating board seat discussion. I asked Michelle if she'd give us a little background on this, since she has been on the board at Polaris.
Thank you. So a couple things to note. The Polaris Consortium is made up of 6 school districts, so all 6 of our districts send students there currently. Those districts are North Olmsted, Olmsted Falls, Fairview Park, Brooklyn, Berea, and Strongsville. But if you notice, 6 is not a great voting number, so what they do to provide an odd number on a board so that there are no ties is every 6th year, a district gets a second seat. So currently, there are 2 Berea board appointees sitting on that board. January 1st, that'll rotate to Strongsville's turn. So we need to discuss as a board who we'd like to appoint to that second seat for just a 1-year term. And I'm offering Laura Hausum as the second member.
Thank you, Michelle. Do we have any discussion? Any questions?
Are you ready?
Do you want to arm wrestle me for it?
I would, but no, I'm going to say no this time.
This time.
I'm excited. I've always loved everything that comes out of Polaris and love to get involved and learn more about the inner workings of it, so I'm excited to do it.
And with the $7 million odd dollar construction project, it'll be a great time to have you on board.
Thank you. All right. Do we need to do anything?
It was on as a discussion item.
Yeah.
So do you want to bring it back for the next meeting for an official vote, or would you shake and say yes? Or we
Okay.
could change it, or if someone wants to make a motion, and
When's our next meeting?
December
December
7th.
December 7th. Spoiler alert, we know what's going to happen.
That was our
When's your
discussion.
next Polaris? Is that what you're looking for, Polaris?
Yeah, because they try to, you'll be invited to that next meeting.
Okay.
So if we could appoint her before the next Polaris meeting, and I think that's the 12th, so it should be fine.
Okay.
Great, all right, thank you. Board of Education, other miscellaneous, do we have any miscellaneous items? All right, hearing none. Next, we have our meeting notifications. A regular Board of Education meeting will be held Thursday, December 7th, 2023, at 7 PM in the meeting room of the Administration Building, 18199 Cook Avenue, Strongsville, Ohio. Next is executive session, and we do have need to go back into executive session to discuss.
To consider the employment, dismissal, and discipline of a public employee, and to consider matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Kilbane. Any discussion? Hearing none. George, take the roll.
Ms. Stavcek?
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
We will enter into executive session at 9 PM. I don't foresee any other need for public meeting, so everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy your next couple days off. Thank you.